welcome to the Road to Autonomy. I'm your host, Grayson Brulte. On today's episode, we're absolutely honored to welcome Timothy Dooner, host of The Truck. Dude, I tried. It wasn't Mortal Kombat style, but I had to try.
You had to try. You had to try. I was telling you a quick story before we came on air because you said you liked the intro, and I'm a '90s kid, and I grew up with Mortal Kombat, and I always remember that iconic ad from like the early '90s where there's a guy yelling "Mortal Kombat" in the streets. This dude named Kyle Wyatt, and I found him on Cameo a few years ago, and I was like, I got a cameo from him, and like, hey, can you scream "What the truck"? Like you screamed Mortal Kombat all those years ago, and got it. Took the soundbite through the intro.
All right,
Mortal
so
Kombat, what the truck?
we grew up around the same time. Did you remember going to the arcades, the old school arcades, and playing Mortal Kombat?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And Street Fighter. And there would always be like one guy that was like a little older, the guy who had moved out of town that would play with like a butt hanging out of his mouth, a cigarette, like the whole Eddie, you could not beat this guy. Like everyone come up and then like you try it, like you're 12 years old and you're like, do I look cool? And you get smoke in your eyes and everything. You're like, how the hell did this guy do that?
And then he had the quarter, and then he always had the quarter on deck, and you always had to wait in this long line to play the game.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Consoles now though.
It's that funny. Then you had that. Who was the guy with the 2R? He was like the big freight companies. He would just come in and move everything, and then he had to go with the precision. Who was that guy?
Well, you had Zangief, who was like the big Russian. He was super strong. You had Jack, who was like a big autonomous robot in the Tekken games. There's a new Tekken out right now, by the way. It's one of my
Oh,
favorite games ever.
that's scary. Games are great, but but freights. You do the what the truck. I know the
Yes.
Mortal Kombat intro. You do great job covering the freight market. What's the outlook for the freight market? A lot of your guests, it seems that there's been mixed opinions on where things are going to go.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's an abusive relationship. Like the freight market, it's so cyclical. It goes so up and down. We had during the pandemic just such a huge run up in two markets, like not just trucks, as everyone was coming for the gold rush, but also brokerages. So you had the service providers grow massively. We also had the trucks grow rapidly. Then when like the tsunami went back out to sea, when the water receded, our market's been dealing with that since like 2022, and we've been dealing with a big number of carriers burning off and a big number of brokers burning off. And there's been so many, but last year we had the largest bankruptcy in trucking history with Yellow that tacked actually, and they finally just paid back our tax dollars. And oddly enough, there's some company called Jack Cooper that's looking to buy them, but that's neither here nor there. But in the freight market, what's happened is like, for example, brokerages. There's 8.1% less brokerages than there were a year ago at the start of this year, but there's still 17 more percent brokerages than we started at the pandemic. So everyone's been waiting for not just volumes to go up, but the way freight works is it's volume plus capacity. So they've been waiting for the capacity to go down. Volumes are looking a little bit better. Things are receding. And this year, I'm hearing a lot more optimism. Like I just had a guest on, Mustafa Azizi from Zoom, and he was like, look, I've been at Stiefel, I've been at Manifest. I've been talking to all the leaders like you have. I've been looking at my own thing. I've been looking at what Craig Fuller, my CEO, put out there. And he's like, I'm seeing green shoots. I think we're going to see market recovery in second half this year. And they all temper it though. There's always an asterisk because it's an election year. There's wars going on, like anything sort of crazy can happen. But the good thing for supply chain is black swan events, things that inhibit capacity or inhibit the movement, they tend to actually be good for the market because it's harder to move a truck or it's harder to move a boat, like you're seeing in the Red Sea where rates have gone up.
The Red Sea was a war zone. You mentioned the asterisk. Yeah,
Mm,
it's inflation.
yeah.
Just look at that. If inflation holds sticky, we're going to see that. Why did the brokerages become cool during the pandemic? Every day, reported in FreightWave or another outlet, new brokerage raises 100 million. Another one raises 75 million. What started that? Let's say cool trend.
I'm sure this is like hitting every other industry, but in freight, people saw like this massive run up in rates. Like rates went like 3x in trucking. They went 10, 20x in ocean. And you had a lot of free capital out there, right? In the market, especially in 2021. And there was just so many VC investors that they would want to invest in a supply chain. They heard their buddy was investing in a supply chain. And like all things considered, a lot of these bets that they take are kind of table stakes. But like we did lose Convoy last year. Convoy, the largest venture backed freight brokerage collapse, one of the largest venture-backed collapses just in general in history. They were, I think, worth over $3 billion at their last valuation point in 2022 before everything sort of fell apart. And now they got like picked up by Flexport for a song. And Flexport themselves has had their own trouble. They're again, what happened, I think, with a lot of the digital freight brokerages are the Scooby-Doo mask came off and it's like these are susceptible to the same exact market forces that your traditional brokerages. They just have, a user interface that's a little bit better. But capacity markets, freight markets, all the same thing. Tech hasn't really altered them that much. What these newer companies did though, that was kind of exciting, and this isn't like the market or anything, is companies like Convoy, they brought a new type of talent in. They got people from Silicon Valley and Seattle to go, oh, wait, freight's a career path. And I'm not talking about like how for a lot of us, it's like last chance motel. Like maybe we tried something else. Like I was in the music industry and then you end up in freight. You have people that are actually like going through career trajectories to get into freight, to become those tech leaders in freight and beyond. And I think that companies like Convoy were highly successful in doing that recruiting, even if it didn't really work out.
Do you feel that Uber Freight accelerated the talent coming into the industry?
In a way, I mean, it's a name, right? Everyone knows Uber, and you go, Uber's touching freight. Uber is, credible to me. I understand that name. And there's, oh, I don't have to be a truck driver. You have to understand, like, most people don't think or know too much about supply chains. And we only think about it when there's nothing on the shelf, sort of like the offensive line of the commerce world. Nobody cares until something bad happens. Brock Purdy gets sacked, and it's because your logistics manager was hungover because he stayed out too late in Vegas, right? Like that becomes an issue. But otherwise, nobody really cares. So when you put big names like Uber or Convoy and people hear these big evaluations, it just brings in like a whole new pool. But I think every other market's probably like money's just not cheap anymore, or at least it wasn't last year.
It's expensive. Funds interest rate is 5.53%. So let's just say you'd be lucky if you can get a term around 7%. If you're really lucky, 6.5%. But I'll say average 8.5%. Well, there's froth in the market. What happens to Coyote? Are they going to get sold? Where do you think they're going?
It's really interesting because we've heard quite a bit about Coyote. Coyote has such a strong lineage in this space, even to this day. Like at least 25 of former ex Coyoteers have become founders, have started their own company. People keep joking that Matt Silver, you're going to go and buy Coyote. He's actually on What the Truck this Friday. So I will ask him personally, but he's already said online, no, he's more interested in sort of nearshoring. He's a cross border guy, but Coyote has a great background. They have a great name. I think someone would be lucky or smart to pick them up. But I really don't know because I think when that news came out too that they might be for sale, everyone's like kind of asking around who are asking like everyone we know who's involved with who or had been involved with Coyote or like me, and no one's speaking. No one's saying, yeah, we have concrete ideas on a deal here. So I'm sticking with Matt Silver. Matt Silver is going to buy it until he tells me otherwise on Friday.
All right. I'm going to throw another ingredient into the cake here. Word on the street is Walmart's getting ready to launch digital brokerage. What does that do?
What does that do? Well, I mean, Walmart is very smart in how they control their supply chain. They have amazing ocean contracts. They have amazing ground contracts. They have an amazing fleet. Their trucking for them, they're one of the highest paying ones out there, over $100,000 they pay out. And they're almost in sort of like the Harvard of trucking for a truck driver to get into. It's sort of an aspirational job. Now, some like the guys who just hate being corporate guys, they completely hate Walmart at all. But there's a lot of drivers out there, especially company ones, that like that's the goal. Go join Walmart. And if you're a carrier, your goal, and you have to understand our industry has 100% turnover. Walmart doesn't have 100% turnover, but our industry does. And most of it is due to low starting pay, or the driver comes in, he goes, all right, 35 cents a mile, fine. Like it'll get better from here. And then like it doesn't. But Walmart people are paid well. Walmart guys are paid well. They really like it. And I think that Walmart is going to take even more control of their supply chain as we move forward. I think Amazon kind of sets the lead on
Mhm.
a lot of these things and on fleet build out and everything. But where Walmart has really been smart enough, Amazon has always been sort of on their own carriers. Amazon, they don't run their own carriers. A lot of these are partners or third party people that are pulling an Amazon trailer. Walmart, by and large, runs their own. So they can control all their costs. They know the market as well as anybody by virtue of having their own fleet. And they're not as susceptible to those massive fluctuations. Like the companies that are getting killed right now are the ones in the spot market.
Walmart's a brilliant company. We have the stock split coming up on the 22nd of February. And the CEO came out and said, we're doing the stock split so employees can buy more stocks. And oh, by the way, we're going to start giving them grants. We want them to have ownership stake. So Walmart, the turnover is low. I'll give you another one. I think they're in Tennessee. I'm not sure. Publix, they have employee stock and the turnover is extremely low. They're really incentivizing employees. And nothing about Walmart, and this is mostly going back to Tom Ward's team, they're all in on autonomy. They've got the relationship with Gattac. Walmart's controlling their own destiny and their own future.
Well, let's not bury the lead. We got to get into this. We know a gentleman who just joined Walmart and he's still with Kodiak. Does this mean Kodiak trucks? It seems like the natural progression of this deal Are Kodiak trucks, are Walmart going to be running Kodiak trucks?
At some point in the future, I would say yes. If you look at the way it was structured, look at the way that the deal was announced publicly, all signs point to that. Kodiak, hypothetically, say Kodiak gets the Walmart contract. Wow. Look at about the volume and the differentiator in the marketplace that that gives Kodiak. It's game changing.
Because he just joined there from USA Truck like a year, maybe less than a year ago, right? He was bringing over sort of that real world nuts and bolts knowledge to Kodiak on how to, we know, stepping into that Walmart role, but keeping the Kodiak one. And I'm like, oh no, where there's smoke, there's some fire. I wonder how soon it'll be before we hear.
I don't know, but I definitely think that there's definitely fire where the smoke is, and it's going to be really interesting.
Has he told you what you talked to him? Has he said anything to you?
James is a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful gentleman. He's an extremely strategic gentleman, and he's very, very smart. That's what I'll say.
What was just announced yesterday? ArcBest came out. Their marketing department just put out that they're running autonomous forklifts, right? Within at least one or two of their locations. Just testing it out. And I realized like a lot of this stuff were in early innings, but I've always said, and you probably agree with me, like the obvious, easiest vector to automate something is a warehouse when you're talking about supply chain or a yard, because at least you don't have to deal with the variables of the road.
You don't, and then you see their budget's $138 million a year for this type of investment. So they're clearly all in. Prologis is all in. If you look at the supply chain, at some point in the future, the entire supply chain is going to be automated. I don't know when it's going to be automated, but I believe it's going to be automated. A lot of your guests, you had the founder of Zeem on the other day talking about, oh, electrification, electrification. I think the bigger play is autonomy, because the economics, your buddy, our buddy, Matt McClellan talks about economics all the time. You can't achieve the unit economics with electric trucks today. You can achieve them with autonomous trucks.
Do you like Zeem? Do you like this electrification as a service model that some of these companies are standing up?
I think Zeem's model is the only way that you can scale it. The average Class A truck is 50% more than the traditional diesel truck for battery. How are you going to scale it if you don't run it as a service? I have this whole theory. I've been crunching the numbers on and crunching the data. I love your take on this. With all the regulations in California with CARB, clean air, ZEV, the costs are astronomical. Nobody can afford it. Labor costs to go on that are astronomical. Is this accelerating the adoption of autonomous trucks because they are lower carbon emissions because the way that they're operated is purely based on a cost structure?
I have to I talk to a lot of fleets and their thoughts on autonomy, and autonomy as a service or electrification as a service. Like they seem so necessary because you probably hear what I do from a lot of these guys is like, we'll pilot it, but it's super expensive. Like we just can't spend 500,000 on one truck. We need to pilot 20, that we don't have $10 million or $5 million to spend on such a project like this, but we would test them and get data. And that's something Matt talks about quite often too. He's like, look, Covenant would be happy to bring in most of these different things. Back when Hyliion was going, I kept saying to Thomas over at Hyliion, I'm like, why don't you give Covenant some of your trucks, sustainability? I can introduce you to him. They can run it around. Now they're just making generators. They sort of tapped out. Both markets have been sort of tough. You like autonomy. You think autonomy is much more investable.
I'm personally invested in autonomy. I have the Road to Autonomy Index. We track 39 companies. A large majority of those companies are trucking companies, trucking OEMs. JB Hunt's in the index, CH Robinson's in the index, Daimler Trucks in the index, Volvo's in the index. Trucking is the market for autonomy that is undervalued from an investment standpoint. If you look at the TAM, it's a very large total addressable market. All the hype went in for the early days around robotaxis, robotaxis, robotaxis. That market's set. Point blank, it's set. There is no competition in that market. It's Waymo's market. It's the same way Tesla set the market for electric vehicle. The golden opportunity is in autonomous trucking, Class 8 long haul over the road. And then middle miles now set in autonomy. That's GATT. This Class 8 space has not been set. A winner has not emerged to have their Waymo Tesla moment yet, but it's coming.
Waymo had a moment in San Francisco over the weekend. What did you think about the angry mob setting one on fire?
Sad. Let's give a hypothetical here. Let's just say that's a typical Jaguar I-Pace without a Waymo branding, without the Waymo autonomy. And these rotten scoundrels, there you go. Dirty Rotten Scoundrels is a great movie, by the way. These
Yes.
rotten scoundrels decided to put a firecracker in it because it was funny to make the thing go kablooey because of the lithium. Would it be reported all over the news? No. It would report all over the news because it was a Waymo vehicle.
Well, sure.
That's the sad part. And I'm not a police officer and I'm not accusing anybody. Those cameras, those vehicles have cameras, real-time cameras. Not one arrest has been made yet for the vandalism of private property. Why?
Do they arrest anybody in San Francisco for private property theft? I see people running out of stores with armfuls of Nikes all the time, Grayson. I hear about Nordstrom's closing over in San Francisco. I don't think you gotta wait for like China to come to town to clean. You never saw any Waymos get set on fire when China was in town, did you?
No. And you didn't see anybody walk out of Walgreens
No,
either.
they brought the billy clubs out when China was in town. Do you think like so in Short Circuit 2, right? Johnny Five, they have to make him a citizen. They have to grant him rights so hooligans and thugs stop beating him up. Do we need a bill of like autonomous vehicle, autonomous entity rights that actually set some guidelines around these things?
It's interesting if you look at it, and I'm not a lawyer. If you look at it from a legal perspective, it's technically private property and you're harming private property. So technically, you should be able to be arrested. We have to, I don't necessarily, I'm not pro regulation. I'm pro common sense. Would you want somebody to do that to your car? Would you want the 15 years of engineering that somebody just thinks it's funny to go beat it up? So now I'm going to piss a lot of people off now. Well, what happened if the autonomy folks or the pro autonomy folks started to go beat up bicycles, started to go beat up public transit? Oh, there'd be a national outrage. I mean, rage against the machine, but just reverse. But yet they do it to us, and it's just, oh, this is what has to happen. It's just, it's not right. It's not fair.
You think we're going to see more of this? Like, when do you think society comes around a little bit more on autonomy? Is it just seeing it more often? Is it because it's new? I mean, that Waymo didn't a Waymo hit a bicyclist a week earlier, and like maybe that was some of the outcry.
How many times a day does an individual get hit by a human car on a bicycle in San Francisco? Hundreds of times a
But
day.
here's the difference. That one driver that hits a person, an individual, you can pull him out of the car, you can beat him up, and you can set him on fire. And that driver, it can't drive the car anymore. But like with autonomy, the one thing is, if like a Waymo causes all that, like they all have the same brain. So right, like one bad driver is driving every single car if you think it's a bad driver.
But the bicyclists or some of them, not all of them, some of them are extremely reckless and they want to get hit because some of them think, oh, it's Google. So now Alphabet, I'll get a payday. And so you have that mentality. Spend time in New York City, you see that the way that the bicyclists drive. Spend time in San Francisco, you see the way that they drive. They think that they're above the rule of law. Really, I'm going to give you a presidential statement here. We need law. We need law enforcement. We need to back the blue. We need the rule of law to come back. Law and order. Dick Wolf you want to talk about doing a great TV show, made a lot of money. Dick Wolf did really great with that. But we need law and order.
We need
You
law
don't
and
see
order.
this happening in Texas. You don't see this happening in Florida. You don't see this happening in Las Vegas. People drink a lot in Las Vegas and do silly things. Just look at some of the Super Bowl stuff. Or I'll give you even a better example. Look at what happened at the Waste Management Open. I don't know if you followed that very closely out in Phoenix.
What happened?
Oh gosh. I'll send you some X videos. It's the drunk palooza of golf. People go there and they drink massive amounts. They get really drunk and do stupid things. They jump into lakes at the golf course. Instead of doing a nice golf pat, they do the drunk fall over and people take the shirts off and slide down the hills. It's basically like you're at the Kentucky Derby, but for golf. Did they damage one Waymo car that week? No. And they were intoxicated, heavily intoxicated. They got so intoxicated. Do you want to hear this? They shut off the beer sales at the golf tournament. That tells you something. Not one Waymo vehicle was damaged.
No one damage, and all those drunks. Crazy to see.
Yeah, I mean, there could have been puke in the car, but there was no damage. They weren't raging against it, which raises a question which I've gone back to for a long time. Why deploy autonomous vehicles in San Francisco? Why deploy them in California? I understand from your industry, from freight logistics, you want that, but the regulatory environment doesn't want you. Last year, Governor Newsom vetoed AB 316, which effectively would have banned autonomous trucks in California. Well, lo and behold, one of the Teamsters doing special interests, they get another politician to run a bill to effectively ban the trucks. Why go somewhere? Why should technology go somewhere where it's not welcome? Why not go to Tennessee? You're the freight capital of the United States. Why not go to Georgia, your neighbor? You got the port of Savannah. Why not spend more time in the Southwest? That's the question that I ask. I mean, what do you think?
California's so weird because like they spend so much money with Pepsi, for example, on like that EV protocol. And a lot of people bundle EV and AV together. I don't know if they thought maybe they would get the same sort of tax breaks and same political breaks as they did with EV that they would in AV, but that's clearly not the case. It seems like when everyone's doing testing now, they're all moving down to corridors in Texas, aren't they? Like, am I wrong? Every time I hear about a trucking company doing testing or we're doing like the next stage of our pilot, it's always some Texas corridor.
It's the Dallas to Houston run. Let's put on the freight wave sonar hat here because you have really great data. So I'm going to give you a plug there. Not profitable route.
No.
It's not a profit. It's a testing route. It's not a profitable route. If you start going, say, from DFW to Savannah, DFW to Atlanta, DFW to Phoenix to Albuquerque, that's interesting. But yes, the technology is testing there. And the industry is doing a really great job. They're building public trust. Texas law enforcement's involved, the Department of Public Safety is involved. They're actively involved in the technology, and that makes the really big difference. The truck guys did it right. They went where the freight volume was, and they went where they were welcome because they built the relationships. The robotaxi guys said, we want San Francisco because it's where the engineers live. And look at the difference in success in both industries. It's pretty dramatic.
It is. It's funny too because I've been looking at a lot of the tech that's out there and who I've been talking to recently, and so much of it is being geared towards that autonomous future. I had Adrian Garcia, who's the founder of GateGo, on my show today, and what they do is automated gate check-ins, which works good for truck drivers, but also works good for trucks with no drivers, autonomous vehicles. Out at the conferences that have been happening recently, they had autonomous glad hands for connecting cables to the back of a semi and a trailer. They had autonomous shunt yard dogs going around. Now ArcBest has those autonomous forklifts. So a lot of the criticism that I heard leading up to these past couple of years in autonomous is like you still need a truck driver to do all of these other aspects. And I agree, you still need a driver to do a lot of them, but companies are aware of this too. And they're building these solutions and they're building them really, really rapidly with this future in mind. And you go, well, there's not a lot of them. Well, there's not a lot of autonomous trucks yet. Like they're scaling up together, and that's what that looks like when an industry scales up. But the actual like answer to the questions of how you service this truck is being developed. It's all happening right now.
The foundation's being laid. SAE ITC is starting to put together a consortium for autonomous truck technicians. How are you going to maintain the trucks? What do the processes look like? All the foundations are being built as we get to commercialization in late 24, early 25. And then as we get to, say, 26, 27, when we start having fleets by the thousands, the infrastructure's built. That's the beauty of it. That's the thing that I love about the freight industry, the trucking industry. They're doing things right when it comes to autonomy. They're developing the relationships with the shippers and carriers. They're developing the relationships with law enforcement. They're putting the safety mechanisms in place. And most importantly, they're building the infrastructure to succeed. They're not just pulling the old Uber model where they say, oh, hi, by the way, we're going to drop 100 robo taxis or your city. Oh, we're going to drop 100 Uber rides in your city. No, they're building all those relationships. And that's setting the ground for something very, very prosperous. I still don't know, and I still won't make a prediction of who's ultimately going to win. I will say, I believe it's only going to come down to a handful of players in this industry, but we're getting there. You do this and you cover a lot. You talk to a lot of OEMs, the truck OEMs. What are you hearing from them as it relates to autonomy? Obviously, Daimler's very public on it, Volvo's very public, and PACCAR, despite being public in their SEC statements behind the scenes, is actually pretty skittish.
Yeah, it's one of those things that everyone seems kind of excited about, but getting sort of like concrete details has been tough. And I don't know if that's because of the timelines established by like the Kodiaks and the Torques of the world. Like Torque has said 2027. They've been saying 2027 for years now. It doesn't seem like an arbitrary date. That seems like that's really what they're targeting. That's what their models say, and that's what their timeline is. Kodiak seems like they're trying to come up a little bit quicker, but I think some of the more interesting things is what's not said. Like Walmart, for example, bringing in James Reed from Kodiak. Like that is like the movement. I feel like at conferences, a lot of companies when they do this stuff, it's a smoke screen, right? They don't want to show you their hand really. It's marketing and a lot of BS. But when you see these sort of big moves happen behind the scenes or these new facilities being built or a new route being established, that's like okay, that's clearly what they think, and that's clearly where they're investing and they're putting their money in. But a lot of fleets, by and large, and you have to understand too, like over 90% of fleets are like 10 trucks or less. They're small carriers in this business. They're not really candidates for autonomy right now because it's so expensive. Maybe they're candidates for like autonomy as a service or electrification as a service. But the bigger fleets, I don't know. Have you heard of any like massive? Can you even make a massive order right now? Can you go to Kodiak and be like, hey, I want 1,000 trucks?
You can, quote unquote, make a massive order, quote unquote, put a deposit just to some of the companies, not all of them. But why?
Yeah.
The trucks aren't ready yet. I can understand if, hi, I want to do a license deal for 10 trucks and starting in 25, 15 trucks in 25. Yes, we saw what happened. Unfortunately, with Too Simple, they had that reservation system. Oh, what was it? 10,000 reservations, 20,000 reservations. It wasn't worth its weight in paper.
Yeah.
But if you're sitting there talking to a fleet and said, I have a commitment to get 15 trucks in 27, believable. Or 26, believable. And then if you look at the model of autonomous trucking, Kodiak's not going to operate a fleet. Aurora's not going to operate a fleet. They're going to license their driver. They're going to partner with the fleets. They're going to partner with the OEM. That becomes really, really interesting. Kodiak and Aurora and Torque and Wabi, basically, they become the brains of the operation. They become the, if you want to use the term, the Intel inside. That becomes really interesting because if you're a fleet, you're not having to spend the billions of dollars to develop that technology. You're able to license it. If you look at corporate America, where we got a couple examples there, a lot of corporate America runs on Salesforce, runs on Slack, runs on Microsoft Office 365. It's probably the best example I can give you is Office 365. A majority of the corporate 500s are highly dependent on it. Or if you're in my case, I love Google Apps, and there's a lot of companies like Google Apps. They're dependent on it. The same thing's going to happen with autonomy. These companies are going to become dependent on it. And you'll have a handful of choices of where you want to go. And the question is, who will be those handfuls? Who will be the ultimate OEM partners? And that's something that I'm watching.
The most exciting, and you mentioned repairs earlier, and like, we're in an industry where we have diesel tech shortages. So repairs, truck not moving, you're not making money. Truck repairs, obviously top of mind for everybody, and that goes for EV, AV, ICE. It doesn't matter. You need to be able to repair the truck. But what I found really compelling is what Kodiak has done with sort of their modular design, the kind that can just stick to the side of the truck. Because even a moron could like install that thing. It doesn't. We've seen some of the other trucks. They have like, it looks like a science project, right? They have like a ton of different sensors and arrays all over. And I remember one time I went in the couple year out one. I'm like, Grayson, can you tell me how much each one of those things costs? And you were like pointing them out, and you're like, thousands, 100,000. That's you're like, you're looking at like $1 million worth of sensors on this thing. Well, Kodiak did, if you, and I'm sure most of your listeners have seen them, but if they haven't, is they put almost all of those sensors inside two boxes, and they just like on your side view mirrors, just connect. Decide you can do a pull up on it too. It's pretty strong. I did one.
I've done one. I've done one too. It's simple. It's 3 bolts.
Yeah.
I'm there. Jordan Coleman and Dan Goff hosted me at their Texas facility, and they go, "Hang on it. I'm not going to hang on this. I don't want to get in trouble. You're being very kind to put me in the truck." And I got a funny story for you on that. I want to be very polite. I said, "No, dude, watch." Jordan gets up there. Dan says, "Whoa, okay, this is interesting." But 3 bolts, and then there's a couple wires that connect. That's scalable, but let's look at the business side. This is where the brilliance of Kodiak comes through outside of engineering. Those pods are patented, and when they're patented, they're licensable. That's interesting. And the other interesting aspect of Kodiak, which is not discussed a lot in these circles, they've got a defense business. That defense business, I think the contract publicly is 50 million, I believe it is. Well, let's look at defense companies. Let's look at Northrop Grumman. Let's look at a new one, Planeteer. Look at some of the other ones, Lockheed. The contracts that they have, they're not 50 million. 200 million, 300 million, billion. That could become a whole big business into itself. It could become Kodiak Defense, could be its own standalone P&L. It's really impressive to see where that goes. So you look at Kodiak, you have a defense business, and we all know defense contractors spit off a lot of cash. There's public market data to back that up. You've got a sensor pod business that is potentially licensable, and then you've got the core Kodiak driver. You have a very great mousetrap that's highly, highly scalable. And that's what a lot of these companies are missing. You have RRAI has a defense business, but most don't. Why not have a defense business? Using autonomy in warfare is one of the greatest uses of autonomy, and it's somewhere that the Department of Defense is going to go. You can read the public statements around the Department of Defense that have clearly said this. You can look at DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Projects are looking at it. It's there, but why? Why do you think more companies aren't really focused on defense?
I don't know, but I mean, some are. I know the drone companies are, because I just watched a video of some Russian guy. He's like outside of his tank, and he got chased by a drone, and the drone just flew at him and exploded. It's frightening, man. War is crazy. Autonomy, like, yeah, it's going to change trucking, but it's changing a lot of things. I mean, like, it's just the drone thing was scary. That was a scary video.
Drones are cool. Last week we had the CFO of Wing, the Alphabet company. I talked about drones
Yeah.
at Walmart and Frisco. Really cool. You want to know what's really interesting about that? The drones only weigh 8 pounds. They're made out of styrofoam. So in case there's an incident, it's not going to cause damage.
Do you ever see them doing deliveries though? Like, I don't see a drone bringing me a pizza. I think the cheese will be to one side. It doesn't really make that much sense to me. Or even like the Amazon truck, because if you think about an Amazon truck, it does something that a drone can't do, which is the final footstep, right? Like, I gotta go outside and retrieve this from a drone. That is not better than how there used to be a guy leaving it on my doorstep. That was easier for me. Now I gotta go outside and retrieve this stupid thing.
And so I was skeptical. And then I went through this with the CFO of Wing. And so a friend of mine in the QSR business, the quick service restaurant, and he said, you got to ask the French fry test. Can you deliver the French fries when they're still crispy and not soggy? So that to me, if you can pass that test, you pass a lot. Shannon says to me, not only do we pass that, we passed the coffee test. I said, what? She goes, "We can deliver hot coffee to you within 7 minutes of order and not spill it." That's impressive. So I'm going to Frisco next month and I'm going to experience this to see if it's true. If it's true, that's it. Would you mind having if you ran out of coffee beans? We've all done it. You could just go out on your front porch and put your hand up all suddenly, and then you got a fresh coffee 7 minutes later. You're a great husband. It's Valentine's Day, so you're a great husband. But think about the convenience of that.
Well, yeah, it's obviously convenient. I always just sort of think about the sort of logistics and the deployment, but food delivery is getting so expensive. I mean, maybe robots could be a better solution, a better mousetrap for it. It's just whenever someone has, I have a guest on that has drones, they always have like some annoying receptacle that the drone has to land into. And the more I look about how like airspace issues and just regulatory issues around them, it sounds even more daunting in some ways than like autonomous trucks do.
From a regulatory aspect, yes, where drones work great. I spent a lot of time in Patagonia and in southern Chile. Those long distances where you're in the middle of nowhere, great application for drones. If you're off roading or you're hiking or you're camping or you're at a remote resort and you want creature comfort, there makes a lot of sense. There's a lot of applications there. But from a regulatory standpoint, right, you have the FAA type 135 that you have to go through. That's very hard. From a regulatory standpoint, autonomous trucks, it's there. You can operate it. It would drive around in the state of Texas today and Arkansas, drive around. Walmart's doing it with Kodiak every day. So it's there from a regulatory standpoint. And I also think from a customer acceptance standpoint, autonomy from a truck standpoint is more acceptable. We have stubborn high inflation. Consumer debt's scary. It's over $1 trillion in an all-time high, and it's only accelerating. That's being factored in by a slowing economy, massive job cuts. So and the rising wages, which these unions are getting, are leading to inflation. There, I said it. So what if I told you a scenario? Let's just pick a place in Texas because the technology's there. It's all legal. The industry gets together with a Walmart, a Kroger, a Publix, anything. Everything in that store is 20% off today because it was brought to you by an autonomous truck. Think about the positive economic impact on that community and think about the family that can barely afford to put food on their table because the technology was able to save the money that they can buy food for their family. You're not there with a drone yet, but you're there with an autonomous truck.
You mentioned Wabi earlier. What's your sort of take on them, and how do you compare them to like Kodiak and Torque, for example?
So Wabi's doing a deep model.
A virtual driver, right?
Yeah, they're doing it. They call it Wabi World. And when they first introduced it to me, I said, "Oh, there's this Wayne's World." I went back to popular culture again. I'm like, Wayne's World party time. And I'm like, is your thing Wabi World sim time? They thought it was kind of funny, but they're taking a simulation first approach to autonomy. I'm unsure of how that's going to scale in the real world. I'm not going to say it's going to work. I'm not going to say it's not going to work. I'm unsure. And I'm actually, honestly, frankly, I'm very curious. And putting on my investor hat, I say, well, if you invest in the business, all fails, you can sell a simulation platform and probably get your money back. So you've got a little bit of investor protection there. But here's the thing on Wabi that's a bigger picture that I don't get. One of the largest investors in Wabi's Series A round was Uber. Well, breaking news here, Dooner. Uber's back. Wabi's out raising a $100 million round. Uber's in for $50 million. Okay. So that was going to make Uber the number one investor on Wabi's cap table. Uber is the number one investor on Aurora's cap table. This is to Uber proper, not Uber Freight. So I want to clarify that for our listeners and viewers here. Where do you think Uber's going? Because they sold ATG to Aurora, so they got rid of the program, but yet they're collectively investing hundreds of millions of dollars into this sector. Are they trying to build an asset light model for autonomous trucking and merge into Uber Freight at some point? What do you
It's
think?
such a weird question because Wabi is so interesting to me because they're unlike sort of what Torque and what Kodiak are doing, which, they make a little bit more sense to me because they're making some of the sensors and devices and they kind of have like this sort of full thought out product where Wabi's like, yeah, we're doing this sort of simulation model. So I'm kind of with you. I'm curious, like, what Uber Freight's intent with all of this is. I mean, I imagine they know their competitors are dealing with autonomous vehicles, so maybe they want to invest too. But I mean, like, how strongly do we think they believe in this? Are they positioned to deploy autonomous trucks?
Uber Freight, Olivia Hu, who's the head of autonomous trucking for Uber Freight, they are actively deploying autonomous trucks. They have contractual relationships with Aurora, Torque, and Wabi. So they're building up an autonomous freight network. It makes a lot of sense for the economic models. Mazen, their chief economist, does a really good job of modeling that. So yes, they are. I understand from a partnership standpoint. I'm uncertain from an investor standpoint. Uber announced the $7 billion stock buyback today. The stock's booming. Is this that they're just trying to buy a seat at the table? But if so, why? Because Uber Freight's not profitable. It's losing money on EBITDA basis.
This ain't a good market to be Uber Freight, and it hasn't been a good market for a couple of years. You don't want to be buying and reselling capacity when the spot market is this low below norms. Although, we are seeing some up and up. These things are cyclical. So maybe it's coming around and they hope when it comes around, they have these relationships in place. Last thing you want to do on this sort of long view tech is scramble at the last minute.
You want to lean into the future. You want to have a seat at the table. So I get having a seat at the table aspect. And then, but if I put on my investor hat, then I question Uber's not an investor in Waymo. Uber's not investor emotional. Both operate on the Uber platform, Waymo in the greater Phoenix area, Motional through Uber Eats in the Santa Monica. So you see, and you're seeing this divide. And then let's give a forward looking statement here. It's been public in Bloomberg that Uber is considering spinning out Uber Freight as a separate publicly traded company. But yet the investments are in Uber proper, not in Uber Freight. I just can't wrap my head around this of where they're trying to go as Dar's been on this incredible mission to lean Uber up and make it profitable, which Mr. Kawasaki has successfully achieved.
I'll be curious to see. It'll be curious to see. I have a friend who's at the Stiefel conference in Miami right now, and he said the digital freight brokerages are under a sale. Everyone at it is just so happy that they're not doing well. And you have to understand a lot of the antipathy towards like maybe them and Convoy had to do with a lot of people felt they were subsidizing freight purchasing. They were using all their venture capital money to just buy freight, manipulating the market and driving it even lower, taking lower contracts and lower bids on freight across the board. So that's where a lot of like the traditional brokerage animosity towards those ones come from. And I think that's why some are sort of dancing on the graveyards of these companies right now. But I wouldn't be so quick to dance on Uber Freight's graveyard. I mean, they got backing, they got smart people in charge there. And I don't think this is something that they're looking to just kill right out. I think that they see a road and a future for this, even if it hasn't made money yet. Uber's done things for a long time that haven't made money. Their own rideshare business didn't it only just start making money?
Yes.
Yeah. So I think like when they look at freight and they look at rideshare, I mean, if they're being logical, they go, okay, the road's longer to get to where freight it hasn't been around as long, but are we making progress towards profitability? And maybe they see autonomy as that path.
It's smart what they're doing, investing now because they're having a seat at the table. At some point, this industry is massively going to commercialize. And if the digital brokerages all fall apart, does Uber just start buying Uber Freight, not Uber proper, but does Uber Freight start buying up all of those pieces? Do you want to hear a crazy cockamamie idea? They go and buy Coyote. They start to consolidate the market. Now, if I'm CH Robinson, oh, I'm nervous. I'm very, very nervous. It'd be very interesting. Do they use some of that capital to consolidate the market and start buying things pennies on the dollar? If they do make a run and consolidate the brokerage market, how do you see the CH Robinsons of the world reacting?
Minnesota will be shook, man. Minnesota will be shook. I mean, Sage Robinson, they've got a freight forwarding business too. So I mean, they're looking overseas, they're tied into farming, they're tied into a lot of specialized kind of things. But I think in their general market, yeah, they would be very concerned about what Uber Freight would represent, especially if they had something like Coyote, because not only do you like Coyote, that like they're oh, we're beating them in the market, they might be on their last legs. And you got someone like Uber Freight come around, bring this company back up, you got a big problem there. And it's sort of funny because I think a lot of people are just sort of waiting for a lot of these digital freight brokerages to die. But I think if you're waiting for Uber Freight to bleed out, that's going to be a long wait.
It's going to be a long wait. If I'm Leo or involved in the management there, I'm weighing all my options to consolidate the market. 100% I'm looking to consolidate the market.
Would you be buying Coyote or would you be investing in Wabi?
I would not invest in the autonomous truck space through Uber Freight. I'd be looking to consolidate my core business and grow my market share. Where, in the words of Warren Buffett, I have a very big moat around it. And in the words of Grayson Brulte, I've got a moat with sharks and alligators in it. That's what I would be looking to do is to build a big moat because now everybody has to come to you to get the capacity. So you don't have to necessarily invest in those companies. And as consolidation comes, which is coming to autonomous trucking, if you wanted to make an acquisition, which I don't think is the wise move, you would be able to because if you stay as you stay as a neutral platform, let's call Uber Freight, let's make them Switzerland. They have a partnership agreement with every autonomous trucking company. Why own them? They all have to come to you. You control the access to the volume. You control access to the freight. You just become a licensing business again. Uber Freight becomes Kodiak for brokerage. They become a giant licensing business. And that's interesting. What are some of the world's greatest businesses? Licensing businesses.
When I gotta ask you something. Why would if I'm looking for like if I'm a shipper or a brokerage, like I can understand why I might be interested in like an EV load board because I can put that towards my ESG score. I can say, "Hey, Ware Act," the California, yeah, the warehouse thing they got over there. Like, look at these truck turns; they're all autonomous vehicles. Like, there's a place regulatory that fits in, but like, where does and let me remind you though, it doesn't fit in that high because I ask all these guys too, and I'm like, "Would you use an electric vehicle?" It's like, yeah, if the price was comparable. Like, everyone goes on price. Why would I go with an autonomous vehicle unless it's cheaper?
It is cheaper because you're going to pay on a per mile basis. You're not going to spend the capex to buy the truck. You're just going to pay for the time or the miles that you use. You can clearly build. You can bake that into your models, and you can get to cost par. Where on the battery electric, you can't. You have to finance that truck. You have to hold that asset. The autonomous truck, you're not going to own the asset. That's the big difference. There is who is the ownership of the asset.
The EV though, you can sell a little bit of a premium maybe on, but like the AV is just a little bit harder in my opinion on the economic side of just getting people to use it in the first place because it's cost driven and you're talking about expensive vehicles, so you got to drive that cost down. But I think if you're investing in autonomous trucks, you realize that like you have to subsidize the market in one way or another to start out with.
That's why we have really great patient investors. It started with angel investors and venture capital, and now it's institutional investors. Because autonomy is going to introduce, as I call it, the autonomy economy. Autonomous trucking, in my opinion, in the future, will be one of the largest industries in the United States. And so, would you want to invest in Standard Oil on the ground floor, or would you want to invest in when it became a trust in New Jersey? You'd want to invest in the ground floor because then you have generational wealth. And generational wealth is what autonomous trucking is going to create. It's not just going to create generational wealth for the individuals that invested early, it's going to create generational wealth for the entire ecosystem because we need really great men and women to operate the truck, to maintain the trucks. And then, just like Tesla did, they're going to get stock options. They're going to get really great bonuses, very similar to what Walmart's doing. Autonomous trucking is going to lift the entire trucking industry up. It's going to, yes, it has its fits, it has its starts, but it's going to lift the entire trucking industry up. And it is going to become the gold standard.
What do you think the sweet spot is? Like for like EV trucks right now, because of their own limitations, it's sort of like the sweet spot is maybe drayage if they can figure out charging, city density, but we're talking more cargo vans there. What do you think the sweet spot is for autonomy? Is it longer mile? Is it that long? Is it 800 miles? Is it that long journey? It's probably not as valuable in short mileage, or is it?
It's twofold. Long, so I would say if I am the CEO of an autonomous trucking company, I'm looking for routes 500 miles or longer. That's what I'm really interested in. That's from a class 8 business. If I'm in the Gaddick shoes, the class 6, I'm looking at sub 50 miles. So you have that really interesting gap that nobody's filled. So let's say you have the guys of the world going sub 50 miles. You have the class 8 long haul guys going 500 plus miles. Technically, just does the 50 to 450, 500, does that space get filled in by a human truck? And then they potentially, then they go home at night, then they become part of their community. That's the big question that has to be asked. But if you're running a drayage operation, let's say you're going from the port of LA San Pedro to the Inland Empire, you can run that autonomous all day long. You have volume going two ways. So you're not deadheading on that, which makes a lot of sense.
Although gates they got to fix the gates at the ports. They're hard to get in just as a human than as a robot truck. Although the robot might not mind waiting as long.
No, you know what's really great about robots? The Cybertruck. How cool is the Cybertruck? You posted some things on X. I posted some things on X. It looks like a robot out of a movie. Look, you can say it's out of Blade Runner. I mean, what do you think of the Cybertruck?
Have you driven one yet?
I ordered one. I've ordered one. I did.
Have you sent one? You ordered one. When's it take? I used to have a pre-order, but I canceled it because my boys got to be 7 and we got 2 labs and like minivan just made more sense. Happy wife, happy life. And like I couldn't really defend the Cybertruck. And also I had like no way I was telling my wife when it would come. Like I'd already kind of delayed her for a couple of years. And it's like, all right, damn, we gotta get
Are you
we
going to
gotta
pull
get
a Jim
Honda
Farley
Odyssey.
CEO of Ford and soup it up and race it around a track?
My minivan, I hope so. I like this Honda Odyssey is a beast. Because nobody wants minivans. You get a lot for like $40,000.
You get a ton. Now, the big question is, so we had the video of the individual and the Tesla Cybertruck with a Vision Pro. Will you get in your Odyssey
Yes.
wearing a Vision Pro?
If Adrian, who was on the show today, he was wearing it. He let me borrow it. I might drive from my house to Freightways. Maybe it's a mile. I probably wouldn't kill anybody. I don't think.
You got to video it though. I have to see proof of this that you're actually going to do this.
I need a headset in the first place. But once I have one, I'm more than happy to. I noticed, by the way, he was wearing the like over the head strap, And I was asking about that because all the reviews say like the single backstrap on your face is just terrible. Like it just gets old like within 15 minutes.
Then you're starting to see the trend now, and there's Google search data to back this up, of people returning the Vision Pro. And Apple at some
Yeah.
point in the next quarterly earnings, hopefully will make it public. At some point today, it's going to become public. I'm going to be really curious. What is the actual conversion rate to somebody buying the Vision Pro, keeping the Vision Pro? You have Robert Schozer, the blogger, calls him. He's like, "Yeah, I'm part of a cult now. This is great." So you have that massive influencer. Then I don't know if you saw Zuckerberg posted a video last night. Yeah, he just ripped it to shreds. And so you can buy the MetaQuest 3,
You might be biased.
$500, or 4,000 for the Apple one. I'm willing to try the other one for 500 and roll the dice. The Vision Pro at 4,000 is a little steep.
You know what I'll say though? So like Zuck was leaning into gaming. He's like, you can game on this, and everyone knows Apple's gaming ecosystem sucks. They don't have anything good for games. But what is leaning is gaming really like the sell for VR? They've been trying to sell us VR headsets since Lawnmower Man. You know, they used to have VR arcades in the 90s.
Yes.
Remember Mortal Kombat 2? They'd have a VR machine by it. And you could spend like $1992 to like put on the VR headset for 10 minutes and you throw up afterwards and you take it off. They've had the Meta Quest. My cousins have those. They're in a drawer. I have this like VR AR like Star Wars thing. It's like a lightsaber training, and it also has like hollow chips, and it's fun. But you know what? Like after like like 3 times, it ends up in the drawer, and then it ends up in the basement because it's kind of a hassle to plug your cell phone into it and get the thing and set up all the things around you. But I think with the Vision Pros, like they're going more for productivity, right? They just want to sell to people who care way more about productivity. But the returns make sense. I bet it's a lot of content creators too who bought them just so they could have fun with it for a week, you know, make some memes, make some videos, do a review for YouTube, and then just bring that thing back down.
Could be. Productivity makes a lot of sense, but if you're working in a factory or working with your hands and you have to train an individual of, say, working on a diesel truck on how to repair a Cummins X15 engine, for example, you could put the goggles on and walk the individual through and create a training video. But is your organization going to spend $4,000 for the equipment for you to create that training video? That's the issue.
Obviously, there's use for mixed reality. Like if you can
Yes.
get the vision processing good enough that like they had an example of someone in a grocery store and they're like, look, and this was a use case. You can wear it in the grocery store and then you can bring up your notepad and like check it off the notepad. I'm like, that's not compelling. You know what's compelling? Because I can do that on my phone. It takes me 2 seconds. That's $3,500. What would be compelling is if I could put a list in here of what I'm looking for, then I go in there and visually it's showing me, or it's showing me similar items, or it's showing me items like within a recipe. Because you can apply that sort of visual processing to a warehouse. Where are different parts? You can apply that to so many different things. There's a ton of runway. Adrian said the example of like looking at sort of windmills, like busted down like windmills and flows and repair. But the issue is like this has to be like $100 safety goggle type of thing with a little bit of processing in it, not $3,500. Companies are cheap. They don't pay this amount of money. It's when you look at like the warehouses. One of the things you probably see, and I'm always like, yeah, but it's not like no one's gonna buy them. Are like those suits for working in warehouses, and they're like, oh yeah, like an injured warehouse worker or a feeble warehouse worker can use this, and now they're 75 pounds. And I'm like, do you know how much they pay warehouse people? Like they're just get another warehouse person. They're not gonna buy like a bunch of exosuits unless it's like specially designed, like like in Aliens. Ripley, she had
Yeah.
that specially designed suit. But like, look how much that costs, that spaceship. Like they're like a government entity. Like your average like Kohl's warehouse probably is not gonna have dudes running around in these things.
No, I'll tell you point blank. I think Tesla's going to sell more Cybertrucks than Apple's going to sell the initial version of the Vision Pro.
Ooh, interesting. So what are the numbers, not pre-order, but like what are the numbers we know on Cybertruck and what are the numbers we know on Apple Vision?
The Cybertruck pre-orders are in the millions. I'm not buying that number. I'm
Yeah.
buying the 500,000, 600,000. I mean, on the low side, three to 400,000. On the Vision Pro, what are we, anywhere from 100,000 to 800,000 maybe
Mhm.
for this? I think I think the Cybertruck will play a bigger role than analysts are willing to credit it. Because if you look at the videos coming online, the people that have one today, they love it and they're
Yeah.
obsessed with it. And you're seeing the opposite with the Vision Pro. The Vision Pro is saying, yeah, it's great, but I'm not really sure I'm going to keep it. You're not seeing that with the Cybertruck, which is interesting. And the Cybertruck is starting at 55,000. Okay. The other one's starting at 3,500, and after tax, you're basically 3,980. I put it in the basket. So I found out the exact number. That's a big swing by tens of thousands of dollars. But yet one's going back, one's not going back. Both are from the future, but one's going back, one's not.
I'll tell you about the Vision Pro. 10 minutes into the interview, Adrian took his off and set it to the side. So I'm not sure what that says about comfort because this thing was like super comfortable and he loved it. I feel like he would have worn it the whole time.
Yeah, because I was an original Google Glass Explorer, and I wore mine, and you could wear them all day. The greatest thing about Google Glass that they never really monetized very well was driving, because I used to get GPS navigation right above my right eye. That was brilliant, and I never had to look down. It would say turn left, turn right, or move over 2 lanes, and that was really good. But the coolest thing I ever did with my Google Glass, I went to Disneyland, and I filmed a day around Disneyland. I did the coolest thing. I waited in line. I had to ask the lady at Disneyland very politely, "Can I get the first seat?" She said, "Yes, you can." I went down Splash Mountain and I recorded a splash. I went to the whole Splash Mountain and recorded it, and that was cool. I didn't have to buy a souvenir photo. I was able to do that. I tried it in a Space Mountain. I didn't really see much, but I tried it.
Yeah. Light. The cameras were still like, especially on that one, very susceptible, I bet, to light.
But it was interesting. I would wear it around without a hat, I would get stopped all the time. "Oh, what's that?" Was like, "Can I try it on?" And it got old. You wear all these great hats, by the way, on What the Truck, and I love the hat collection there,
Thanks.
is when I wore the hats, nobody bothered me because they could barely see it. It would just sit right under the rim. And the cool thing is, and we both have kids, you just blink your eye, took the photo. Didn't have to touch anything, just blinked. You just did a hard blink and it would take a photo. So if you're trying to capture a moment with your kids, I'm going back to Disneyland, so I used a lot of Disneyland, a moment at Disneyland, blink, took the photo. That was it. Really, really brilliant. And I think it was $1,500, half the price of the Vision Pro. Yeah, you didn't have the full augmented reality experience, but it was half the price. A lot of things are going to change in technology. A lot of things are going to change in trucking, especially over the coming year. You had that really great guest that gave the capital IQ around the M&A, really great session with that gentleman. Dooner, what do you see happening in the trucking sector this year? And any big developments that you're looking for?
It's interesting. I was asking my buddy Ryan Schreiber from Metaphor was on today, and the logistics conference season has kicked off, and I was asking him and this other guy Mustafa, who's been at a few of them in the early innings this year and end of last year, and I was like, a lot of the money and the financing has pivoted over to AI. That's what everyone's talking. AI is exciting. Digital freight brokerages hate those. Love AI, and it's like, well, AI encompasses a lot of things. Like, what will actually make an impact this year? And Ryan said something really interesting, and I think we all heard it on that, it was the guy from Argentina. Remember the guy from Argentina? He did that speech, and they used AI to, like, do his voice,
Oh,
the
the new
inflection.
president, Javier Mills. And you wanna know
Yeah,
interesting thing about the president of Argentina, and I gotta give him a shout out for this. So he put together his reform package for what he wants to do in office. Do you know what's included in that bill? Legalizing autonomous vehicles to develop economic stimulus because 'cause they're good for the economy.
interesting.
Very big move. I digress. Go ahead, sir.
I I think language, right? Supply chain, globally connected world. I think in the global supply chain, the sort of biggest tech impact you're gonna see this year is in, translation, natural language processing, all of that kind of stuff. And I think that's gonna make a big difference in this space without being one of those sort of, like, pie in the sky things, like saying, I don't know, 50,000 autonomous trucks will be on the roads driving commercially. So I think AI is gonna make a big impact, and it's gonna work outwards from there. I mean, ultimately, the brains inside the autonomous vehicles we talk about. But I think this year, just because of how investments have been kind of muted and stuff, I think they're pouring into AI. I think they're pouring into kind of these sort of lower risk companies. They can do these bids on here and hopefully develop something. And yeah, I think the biggest inroads are, I think Ryan's right. I think in language, it's going to make a big impact, at least on the global side.
Think about how much faster you can negotiate a deal if you're trying to go through Tunisia or somewhere in the Mediterranean Sea and you have to translate it to Arabic. You can do it in real time.
Yeah.
Think about that. Or you're trying to do a deal with the European Union, perhaps it's in Germany or in France, and it's like, "Well, what do I do? Oh, there's a translation problem." It was interesting you say that because on X, an individual responded to me about a report I put out on Uber in French. So I went on Google Translate, I translated it, and then I wrote him back in English, but had Google Translate it, and I posted it in French, and we're able to go back and forth. I would have been able to interact. I speak petit peu,
Yeah.
French, not very much, but I was able to go back and forth that gentleman. It opens the world. AI is going to open the world. It'd be really curious to see from a freight perspective, from a supply chain perspective, outside of language, how it's used, what type of improvements, because AI will unlock efficiency. Dooner, we love having you. As we look to wrap up for today, and we'll have you back in a couple months. What would you like our listeners to take away with them today?
It's an exciting road. You've got a good guide to bring you down it here in Grayson. I think that there's a lot of inroads. I mean, just keep in mind that this is still it's getting closer. Like we said, one of the more conservative companies still does really well. Torque says 2027, but we know Kodiak's making great inroads. I think that licensing aspect that you brought up is a really, really good point. I think we're going to see a lot of those deals happening in supply chain. I think AI, obviously, I mean, not telling you much there, but I think if you're looking in the autonomy space, we've identified a few companies that you should be looking into. And those are Torques, Kodiaks, Wabi doing some interesting stuff, and especially what they're doing with Uber Freight. If anyone's got more insight on that, I'm sure Grayson and myself would both like to know. If you're you're an insider, drop us a DM. And other than that, check out What the Truck if you want to know more at an accessible level. You want to know more about freight logistics. I cover a lot of technology like Grayson, especially if it touches our space. So look up What the Truck wherever you get podcasts, and you can find me on social media at Timothy Dooner. That's Dooner. You can find me on LinkedIn, X. Those are where I'm most active.
You post great content. I love What the Truck's not only a podcast, it's a produced show. Dooner, what days and what times do you release the show?
Yeah, we're live Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays at noon Eastern time across Freightwaves social channels. For is a company that I work with, and on demand afterwards. You don't have to make an appointment with a podcast these days. Just listen at your leisure.
You just tune in and get ready to hear What the Truck Mortal
There,
Kombat style. It's great.
of course.
The future is bright. The future is autonomous. The future is leading into the future. Dooner, thank you so much for coming on the road to autonomy today.
Thanks for having me, man. Tality.
You're welcome.